Okay, I'm back. It's kind of weird doing this at home. Phones ring, dogs bark, that sort of thing. But anyways, I think we finished up histoplasmosis. A little rushed on my part because the darn phone was ringing. Hopefully I mentioned that the predisposing factors was, once again, inhalation of large quantities of the spores, and amphotericin B given by IV would be the treatment for those few serious cases. Remember, so if I asked you this on an exam, oh, how would I phrase this? True or false, the majority of patients with histoplasmosis will receive amphotericin B in the form of treatment. That would really be false, because the vast majority of individuals that have been infected with this organism will not require any treatment at all. Okay, let's go ahead and forge ahead to the fifth and final category, which are opportunistic mycoses. Okay, now these are going to be systemic infections. So why do they have their own category? Because primarily of the population of individuals that are going to be affected by these infections, and they are severely immunocompromised individuals. What do I mean by that? I would mean individuals with terminal cancer, with HIV, late stages HIV, individuals that are otherwise seriously immunocompromised. I don't mean just a little bit sick. I mean their immune system is not functioning in a normal manner. All right, so transmission. Two possibilities here, and I'll discuss an example of each. First of all would be through inhalation, all right? And the other would be the patient's normal flora has become opportunistic. And let's go, oh, and so the level of tissue infected, again, these are systemic infections. All right, now the first example I want to talk about would be an example of an opportunistic mycosis that is inhaled. And it's a disease called Aspergillosis, caused by Aspergillus fumigatus. This is a mold, and it is ubiquitous, which means present everywhere. It's found in the soil, on surfaces, it's everywhere. And we are really encountering this organism very often in our life, but if the individual is even remotely healthy, this is not going to be a problem. It's seriously immunocompromised individuals that are going to possibly die from this disease. If you are reading patient charts someday later in your professional career, and you see that the patient has this Aspergillus fumigatus, this patient is probably a terminal patient. All right, so clinical characteristics. 3 forms of the disease, and they become increasingly serious. First of all is the allergic form of the disease. Presents with asthma-like symptoms, wheezing, difficulty inhaling and exhaling, not good air volume. And what happens is that the organism is growing on the bronchial membranes of the infected individual. Now, the second form of the disease is what's known as an aspergilloma, and also known, this is also known as a fungus ball. Now, what happens is that the organism is actually colonizing cavities in the lung and forms a ball of this fungal growth. Doesn't sound good, yes? And then the third form of the disease, and the most serious, is called the invasive form. Now, in this particular case, the lung tissues are broadly infected with the organism, and it is actually causing necrosis of the lung tissue, which necrotic means dead, necrosis means death, dying of the tissue. And again, I will reiterate that this is the most serious and potentially life-threatening form of the disease. Geography. This is a disease with cosmopolitan distribution. Population, seriously immunocompromised individuals, which would be the same for predisposing factors. All right, so population and predisposing factors, you have to be seriously immunocompromised for this to be a problem. Treatment. All right, well, we need to, first of all, treat the underlying disease, HIV, cancer, whatever the patient is dealing with. And then the treatment for the fungal infection is going to depend on the form of the disease that we're dealing with. We're going to use amphotericin B in some cases. For the aspergilloma, that will likely be surgically removed. And other drugs that might be used include nystatin. I don't know if this is in your notes or not. I just want to double check. Nope. Nystatin, Nystatin. And let me see if I'm forgetting anything. No, I think we're good. Okay, so remember I told you earlier when I started the section on opportunistic mycoses, mode of transmission, either inhalation or normal flora gone rogue. All right, so that was our example of inhalation. Now, the second example is a disease called systemic Candida infection caused by Candida albicans. Now, this organism is normal flora for many people. It could be normal flora of the skin, of the oral cavity, actually all the way through the GI tract, normal flora of the vagina as well. So it's likely present in the patient. And when the individual becomes severely immunocompromised, the organism is able to gain a foothold and proliferate to the point where it can cause a disease state. So normal flora, right? So let's talk about a couple of ways that this disease might progress. Might begin as an oral infection known as thrush, T-H-R-U-S-H. Thrush is common in newborns. Their immune system isn't fully developed. Also common in cancer patients and HIV patients with advanced disease. And it's an overgrowth of Candida albicans in the mouth. It's quite unpleasant, quite painful. And let's say we have a situation where the patient is so severely immunocompromised that the thrush infection actually is going to move down the throat. It can enter the bloodstream, become systemic in that way. Couple other possibilities. A vaginal yeast infection by Candida albicans, either, I can't imagine why, but either isn't treated or treatment isn't successful. It can travel up the system, all right, into the bladder, the kidneys, into the bloodstream, all right? So those are a couple of ways that the infection may gain a foothold. All right, so geography and population, cosmopolitan distribution, population, seriously immunocompromised, predisposing factors, seriously immunocompromised. Now, I just want to clarify, guys, under clinical characteristics, I'm not going to give you any specifics there because there are so many forms of the disease that there's a lot of variability there. I just didn't want to make you crazy later wondering where the information was on clinical characteristics. Right, and then treatment, it's going to largely depend on the exact nature of the disease and its origins, but treatment could include drugs such as nystatin or amphotericin B. All right, so let's see, just one more thing to wrap up this lecture, and that is I just wanted to look at this vocabulary with you. The fungi are what we refer to as being heterotrophic. That word literally means different feeder, but it also means that heterotrophic organisms are going to obtain their nutrients in a preformed package, let's say. That means they, and as with the fungi, often they are decomposers, and the fungi are going to absorb their nutrients through their outermost covering. Sometimes that's called a cuticle. Right, I already mentioned hyphae earlier in one of the parts of this lecture. Those are long filaments of mold cells. And so if you see, let's say, mold growing on a piece of bread, you see this like patch of fuzziness, that would be a mycelium. And a mycelium is a visible to the naked eye, tangled mass of many of these hyphae. And as far as reproduction of the fungi go, they reproduce using spores. Now, we'll talk more about fungal spores in lab, but some of these spores are produced sexually, which means an exchange of genetic information between two members of the same species. And in other cases, spores are asexually produced. Asexually means no genetic recombination, and we'll talk about those, as I said, in lab in more detail than you will want, I'm sure. Okay, guys, that finishes up this section, and I hope to see you soon. Thanks for watching.